Chapter 1. Harold Santiago was dead. Before the funeral, his wife, Charina Moran Santiago, went through his belongings and found a thick photo album. The cover read, "My love." She flipped it open, but the memories captured inside didn't belong to her. Instead, they were all of Hazel Suarez, the young woman Harold had adopted years ago. Charina had always believed Harold saw Hazel as more than a guardian's affection for his ward. But every photo of Hazel in the album, whether she was laughing, sleeping, or in tears, was filled with an unmistakable tenderness, the kind shared between lovers. Then, she saw a photo of Hazel in a wedding dress, with a handwritten line beneath it. "If I can't marry the love of my life, I may as well settle for anyone." Charina's face turned pale as she took in the secrets Harold had kept for years. 20 years of marriage, and in the end, all she had been to him was someone to settle for. The funeral began soon after. People around her whispered their condolences. "Try not to dwell on it. He's gone now. Just take the inheritance and live well." Yeah, even though Harold's company is in trouble with that drug lawsuit, he had more than enough assets. "You won't have to worry about money." But as soon as they said that, a lawyer stepped forward and said, "Mr. Santiago left a will. He decided to leave all his assets, including real estate and investments, to Miss Hazel Suarez." Gasps filled the room. Then, suddenly, someone burst in. "If all his money went to her, then who the hell is paying our medical compensation?" It was the family members of those harmed by Harold's faulty drug. Their eyes landed on Charina, and rage twisted their faces. "That's his wife. If we can't get our money, then she can pay for it with her life." As they rushed forward, a sharp dagger plunged into Charina's chest. Charina collapsed. The last thing she saw was Harold's cold, indifferent gaze in the black and white photograph. As her eyes shut, one final thought echoed in her mind: "If I had another chance, I would never marry you again, Harrison." When Charina opened her eyes, she was lying in disheveled bed. Before she could process anything, a cold voice rang in her ears: "I already called my parents. The wedding is in 5 days. Happy now, Charina." She looked up and saw Harold. This Harold was not the man in his 50s who had died. He was a younger version, early 30s, still in his prime. Realization hit her like a tidal wave. She had gone back in time, back to the days before their wedding. Their marriage had been arranged since childhood, but Harold had never liked her. He delayed the engagement for years, turning her into the laughingstock of Dornwich. Then, one night, Harold got drunk. Charina happened to be there, and in a moment of chaos, they ended up in bed together. Harold was convinced she had set him up. He resented her for it but felt obligated to go through with the marriage. After they got married, he was cold and distant. But Charina had loved him with everything she had. When his company was struggling, she gave him her entire family fortune. Harold hated seeing her go out, so she quit her job and stayed home. He liked peace and quiet, so she never dared to walk too. She had spent over a decade treading carefully, only to earn a few rare smiles from him. And even those were fleeting. She had thought he was just naturally distant. But now, she knew the truth. He had never been cold. He had simply given all his love to someone else. Pain crawled through her chest like ants biting into her heart. But Charina forced herself to snap out of it. She looked up at the man before her. "You don't have to take responsibility," she said calmly. "Let's call off the engagement." She wasn't about to waste another lifetime on a man who didn't love her. Harold let out a short, mocking laugh. "Trying to play hard to get now." Charina froze. She remembered how madly she had loved Harold in her youth. More than once, she had threatened to break off the engagement in a fit of anger, only to be persuaded back by his parents. That was why Harold had never believed she would actually leave him. "I mean it this time," she started, but Harold just turned and walked away. Same as before. He never listened to a word she said. Charina sighed. Never mind. Since she wanted to break off the engagement, all she had to do was tell the Santiago family directly. There was something far more important to do first. Charina picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Mr. Houghton, is there still a chance for me to apply for Project Ether?" Her teacher, Dylan Houghton, sounded thrilled on the other end of the line. Of course. You were personally requested for it. But Charina, as I told you before, this is a top-secret program. If you join, have to stay at Nebula Aerospace Base for 10 years. You also can't contact the outside world. Are you sure? Charina majored in aerospace engineering in college, excelling in her studies. Her graduate research focused on technology that was in high demand by the nation. Right after graduation, she had received an offer to join the nation's aerospace program. It had been her dream. But in her previous life, Harold had proposed. After much hesitation, she gave up her dream to become his wife. This time, she would live for herself. I'm sure, Charina said. Dylan sounded thrilled. Great, but the project starts soon. You'll need to leave in 5 days. Say your goodbyes to your family while you can. Chapter 2. Charina had no family to say goodbye to. Her parents had died when she was 15 years old, leaving her as the sole member of the Moran family. She called Harold's parents and formally asked to call off the engagement. After hanging up, she headed to the auction house. Charina's mother, Livia Kane, had been a renowned ceramic artist. After Livia's passing, Charina had spent years collecting her works, cherishing them as mementos. One of the pieces, titled, Love, was created by Livia while she was pregnant with Charina. Charina had spent years searching for it. Fate seemed to be on her side. Just before she was set to leave for Nebula Research Center, she finally found, Love, up for auction. Arriving at the venue, she was surprised to see Harold and Hazel there as well. Harold's gaze turned cold the moment he spotted her. Charina, haven't you had enough? Charina blinked. What? His irritation deepened. You called my parents to break off the engagement just because you weren't happy with how rushed the wedding was, right? I've increased the wedding budget tenfold. Are you, happy Ro? Charina realized he still didn't believe she was serious about calling off the engagement. You misunderstood. I really. Enough, Harold interrupted. Quit playing games, Charina. Looking at the icy expression on his face, Charina lost the desire to argue. Forget it. In 4 days, when the wedding happened without a bride, he'd finally believe her. The auction began. Harold turned to Hazel and asked gently, Hazel, your birthday is coming up. Tell me what you want. I'll get you anything. Hazel fidgeted with the hem of her dress and shook her head. Uncle Harry, you've already done so much for me by raising me. Everything here is too expensive. I don't deserve any of it. Don't say that. Harold frowned. You deserve the best. Hazel's father had been one of Harold's employees. 12 years ago, he died saving Harold, so the latter adopted Hazel and had her call him Uncle Harry. Back then, Hazel had been a 10-year-old girl, and Harold was 21 years old. 12 years had passed, and the timid little girl had grown into a strikingly beautiful young woman. Watching the tenderness in Harold's expression as he gazed at Hazel, Charina suddenly realized just how blind she'd been in her past life. How had she never noticed his feelings for Hazel before? At that moment, the auctioneer's voice rang out. Next up is a renowned porcelain piece, Love. The sculpture was placed on display. It was a porcelain white depiction of a mother elephant embracing her calf. Hazel lifted her head instantly. Harold noticed. You like this? Hazel's cheeks flushed. It reminds me of my late mother. At the same moment, Charina raised her paddle. $10 million. She offered double the market value without hesitation. No matter what, she had to reclaim Livia's work. But to her surprise, Harold raised his bidding paddle as well. $15 million. Charina snapped her head around to look at him. His expression remained indifferent. Hazel likes it. Anger flashed in her eyes. That is my mom's piece. Harold froze, only then noticing the artist's name. His hand holding the paddle instinctively lowered, but Hazel suddenly choked up and said, It's okay, Uncle Harry. I'm not worthy of something so beautiful anyway. Harold looked at her tear-filled eyes and felt a sharp pang in his chest. Without a second thought, he turned to a staff member. I'm bidding on blank checks. I'm taking that piece home, no matter what. Chapter 3. Bidding on blank checks meant that no matter how high the price went, Harold would outbid it by another $1 million. He was determined to win love at any cost. Charina's face went pale. Harold. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Do you really have to do this? I've never asked you for anything before. But please, I'm begging you this time. Let me have my mom's piece. Livia had told her about this porcelain sculpture so many times. It was the one thing Charina had spent years trying to get back. But Harold's expression remained indifferent. Hazel likes it. Charina's hand slowly dropped. Even though she had inherited a fortune from her parents, she couldn't outbid Harold's wealth. In the end, love was placed in Hazel's hands. Thank you, Uncle Harry. I love it so much. Hazel beamed as she accepted the sculpture, only for it to slip from her grasp. The porcelain hit the floor with a sharp clatter, shattering into pieces. Livia's most cherished piece was gone just like that. Charina picked up the broken shards with red-rimmed eyes, carefully carrying them home. She sat down and began piecing them back together. She had barely formed the outline when a maid approached her. Miss Moran, Miss Suarez is here. She's kneeling at the gate, begging for your forgiveness. She said she won't get up unless you go out and tell her personally that you forgive her. Charina didn't even look up. I don't want to see her. After a while, heavy rain poured from the sky. Harold stormed into Moran Manor, his expression thunderous. Charina Moran, don't you think you're taking this too far? The man who was always composed now burned with anger. Hazel has been kneeling out there for an hour. All you have to do is step outside and tell her you forgive her. Is that so hard? Charina's hands, carefully positioning the fragments, finally stilled. She chose to kneel, she said coldly. She destroyed my mom's piece, why should I forgive her? You. Harold was furious. But before he could lash out, his assistant, Patrick Hampton, rushed in. Mr. Santiago, Miss Suarez just fainted. What? Harold's expression darkened completely. When he looked up and saw Charina still calmly piecing the fragments together, his anger boiled over. With a fierce sweep of his hand, he sent the nearly reconstructed porcelain crashing to the floor. Charina, you're heartless. After saying that, he stormed out without looking back and scooped Hazel into his arms from the pouring rain. As Charina stared at the wreckage on the floor, the tears she had been holding back finally fell. Heartless. She had chased after him for years, hoping for just a sliver of his attention. And what had she gotten in return? A tragic death in her last life and cruelty in this. Who, exactly, was the heartless one? Charina wiped her tears and bent down to collect what little remained of Livia's piece. Harold, I won't love you anymore. Not even a little, she thought. Determined to sever all ties, Charina packed every gift Harold had ever given her and sent them back to the Santiago residence. Not that those gifts had ever truly been from him. Each time, it had been his parents forcing him to send something, and he had Patrick buy them on his behalf. The only exception was the Santiago family's heirloom emerald pendant. It was too valuable to simply be mailed back. Charina decided to return it to Harold in person. But when she arrived outside Hazel's ward, she unexpectedly heard Hazel's voice. Uncle Harry, please don't be so good to me. I'm afraid I'll get too used to it. When you get married, I won't know how to handle it. Through the glass on the door, Charina saw Harold's expression soften with affection. He reached out instinctively, as if about to pull Hazel into his arms. But he stopped himself. Instead, his hand landed gently on her head. His gaze was filled with suppressed emotion. Don't be silly. Even after I'm married, I'll always take care of you. Hazel's eyes lit up. But Harold continued, I told you, you can think of me as your real uncle. I'll look after you for life. Disappointment flickered in Hazel's eyes as she lowered her head. Oh, just an uncle, she murmured. But Uncle Harry, once you have children of your own, what will I be to you? Then, that won't happen. Harold's response was immediate. I will never have children with Charina. Hazel froze. Why? Harold looked at her. Something unreadable in his gaze. I've already arranged for long-term birth control. After Charina and I marry, she'll take it daily. We won't have children. Hazel, I'll always be your uncle. And one day, everything I have will be yours. So, don't worry, alright? Chapter 4. Uncle Harry. Hazel's eyes brimmed with tears as she threw herself into Harold's arms. At the doorway, Charina stood frozen, her face drained of color. She remembered that in her past life, Harold had given her a special brand of vitamins, claiming they were tailored just for her. She had been so touched by his thoughtfulness that she took them religiously, day after day, without second thought. Years passed, yet she never conceived. When they finally sought medical advice, the tests showed that Charina had hormonal issues. Desperate for a child, she endured round after round of ovulation shots. Her stomach became a battlefield of bruises, and her body swelled from the hormone injections. But no matter what she did, she never got pregnant. Her doctor had questioned whether something in her diet or supplements was interfering with the treatment, but Charina never suspected the so-called vitamins Harold had given her. Now, the truth slammed into her like a freight train. Her knees buckled slightly, and she staggered back a step. How could Harold be so cruel? Just then, Harold's bodyguard happened to walk over and was startled to see her standing at the door. Miss Moran. Charina shoved the emerald pendant into his hands. Give this to Harold. Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked away. It was Charina's birthday. Since she was leaving soon, she made a rare exception and hosted a grand birthday party, inviting all her friends, despite never being one for lively gatherings. She just hadn't expected Harold to show up with Hazel in tow. Your present. Harold's voice was cool as he tossed a small box her way. Charina glanced down. It was a diamond ring. Just like in her past life. How ridiculous. Harold treated a ring others used for proposals as a birthday gift. It was as if to remind her that this marriage was nothing but an act of charity. It was laughable how, in her past life, Charina had been completely oblivious. She was even moved to tears by this ring. This time, she handed it back without hesitation. Didn't you get what I had your bodyguard deliver to you last time? If he had seen the heirloom emerald pendant she had returned, he should have understood that she had no intention of marrying him. Harold frowned. I didn't open it. I already told you. I don't need gifts. You don't have to give me anything. Charina blinked before realization set in. He must have assumed the bag was just another one of her gifts and hadn't even bothered to look inside. Charina remembered that in her past life, while sorting through Harold's belongings, she had found a storage room in the basement filled with dust-covered boxes. They were all the gifts she had given him. There was the necklace she had hand-carved for his 25th birthday after a week of painstaking effort, the blessed charm she had prayed for 3 days to obtain when he fell seriously ill at 33 years old, and the custom-made incense she made herself when he started suffering from migraines at 40 years old. All those gifts she had painstakingly prepared had been carelessly tossed into the storage room, never even opened. And yet, Hazel's paper stars, her cheap neckties, and even her little notes had all been carefully stored away in his safe. Charina's lips curled in a mocking smile, but she didn't bother explaining. Instead, she turned to greet her guests. Halfway through the party, Hazel suddenly collapsed against Harold. Uncle Harry, my head feels so dizzy. Harold's expression darkened instantly. Did you eat something bad? Are you sick? I'll take you to the hospital. Without hesitation, he swept Hazel up in his arms and strode toward the exit. Charina frowned. As the host of the party, she couldn't ignore the situation. If something happened to Hazel, the responsibility would fall on her. She didn't want any unnecessary trouble before leaving, so she followed them out. But as she approached Harold's sleek black Bentley, Hazel's soft moan reached her ears. Uncle Harry? I feel so hot. Something feels off down there. Chapter 5. Charina's hand, poised to knock on the car door, froze midair. If even she could tell what was going on, there was no way Harold couldn't. She heard the urgency in his voice. Hazel, you've been drugged. I'm taking you to the hospital right now. But Hazel clung to him, her voice breaking into desperate sobs. It's too late, Uncle Harry, I can't take it, please help me, I just want you. Her sweet, tearful voice hit every raw nerve in Harold's body. Harold had been holding himself back with every ounce of restraint he had. But now, hearing her breathless plea, the dam finally broke. Like a beast unleashed, he shoved her down. Charina stood there, staring as the car rocked violently. She listened as Hazel's cries turned to breathless moans, then to pleading, and finally to soft whimpers. And Harold hadn't even stopped. Charina's lips curled into a faint, weary smile. In her past life, she had been married to Harold for 20 years, yet she could count on one hand the number of times they'd been intimate. Even then, by the time they settled into a routine once a month, it was only because she had begged for it as a birthday gift when she turned 35 years old. Back then, she had convinced herself that Harold simply had no interest in such things. But now, listening to what was happening inside that car, she understood. It wasn't that he had no interest. He just had no interest in her. Charina turned away. Maybe this was for the best. This time around, everyone was finally getting what they truly wanted. She returned to the party. 2 hours later, as the event wound down, it was time for her to give a speech. She went upstairs to the dressing room, poured herself a glass of juice, and was about to freshen up her makeup when a sudden heat surged through her lower abdomen. Something was wrong. She opened her mouth to call for help. But before she could, a cold voice came from the doorway. How does it feel, Charina? Not so fun being the one who's been drugged, is it? Chapter 6. Charina's head snapped up, and she saw Harold standing at the doorway. She quickly realized what was going on. You spiked my juice. Her voice shook with rage. What the hell are you trying to do, Harold? Harold smirked as he strode forward and gripped her chin. That's what I should be asking you. Why did you drug Hazel? Just because she accidentally broke your mother's peace, you decided to drug her. You wanted her to humiliate herself in front of everyone and lose her innocence. She's so young, Charina. How could you be so cruel? Charina was stunned by his words. When did I drug Hazel? Harold shoved her aside. Don't bother denying it. I already asked Hazel. The only thing she drank today was the water you gave her. If it wasn't you, then who else? At that moment, Charina finally understood what blind favoritism truly meant. Hazel only had to say one sentence, and Harold didn't even hesitate to condemn her. Crazy bastard. She let out a cold laugh and struggled to grab her phone to call an ambulance. But Harold snatched it away. What are you doing? She snapped. He stared down at her. This drug is strong. The only thing you can do is beg me. Calling an ambulance won't help you. Charina didn't understand. Beg you? For what? To cure you, of course. Harold let out a cold laugh. But I don't do charity work. If you want my help, you'll have to apologize to Hazel on your knees first. Charina stared at him in utter disbelief. He had just been with Hazel in the car, and now, he wanted to cure her the same way. And he expected her to beg for it. A wave of nausea rolled through her, but Harold was already leaning in. Drop the act, Charina. Isn't this what you wanted all along? He sneered. You used this exact trick to force me into marriage before. And now, all I'm asking is for you to take responsibility for what you did and apologize. Is there a problem with that? Charina had had enough. She shoved him away, snatched the scissors off the table, and spoke through gritted teeth. You want me to apologize to Hazel on my knees? Dream on. Without a second thought, she plunged the scissors straight into her own thigh. Chapter 7. Harold's expression finally changed. Charina, what the hell are you doing? But Charina ignored him. She drove the scissors into her thigh again and again. Her pristine white dress was soaked in crimson within seconds. Harold stood frozen. Did she despise his touch so much that she would rather hurt herself than give in? The thought sent an unfamiliar frustration surging through his chest. Charina Moran. With a furious growl, he grabbed her wrist. The scissors clattered to the floor, and the sharp sting of pain cut through the haze in Charina's mind. At that moment, applause erupted from downstairs. The guests were waiting for her birthday speech. Biting down against the agony, Charina shoved Harold aside and descended the stairs. Seeing her covered in blood, the crowd gasped in shock. But Charina's expression remained unchanged. She lifted her chin. Blood soaked her dress, staining it like a rose blooming in the snow. Raising her glass, she smiled at the crowd. Wishing myself a happy 29th birthday. And with that, she collapsed. Amid the panicked shouts, Harold lunged forward and caught her. Charina was unconscious for an entire day and night. When she was finally discharged, she returned home to pack. She had just finished when Harold showed up with Hazel by his side. "I've looked into it," Harold said stiffly. "The drugging was a mistake. You had nothing to do with it." Charina didn't react, but beside him, Hazel burst into tears. "It was all my fault, Charina. I spoke carelessly and made Uncle Harry misunderstand you. To make it up to you, I designed your wedding dress. Consider it my birthday gift to you, too." Charina finally looked at the wedding dress in Hazel's hands. Memories of her past life resurfaced, and a cold smile curled her lips. "You designed a dress without even checking my size. How am I supposed to wear that?" In her previous life, on the eve of the wedding, Hazel had also presented Charina with a wedding dress she had designed herself. Without hesitation, Harold had returned the high-end custom dress Charina had selected and insisted she wear Hazel's design instead. The problem: Hazel's dress had been too small. It was impossible to fit into. When Charina had pointed it out, Harold had only given her a cold look and said, "Then lose weight." So, for 2 days leading up to the wedding, Charina hadn't eaten a single bite. She hadn't even dared to drink water. And in the end, she had passed out at the altar. This time, Charina was no longer that fool. Hazel's face turned pale at her words. I'm so sorry." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "When I was designing the dress, I kept imagining myself as the bride. I must have accidentally." Harold's head snapped up. A complicated emotion flickered in his gaze. Hazel gasped, hastily covering her mouth, as if realizing what she had just said. A heavy silence filled the air. Then, Charina let out a slow, amused laugh. "Well, then, why don't you wear it?" Chapter 8. Hazel froze, and Harold's face immediately darkened. "What the hell are you talking about, Charina? I'm her uncle." Charina's lips curled into a mocking smile. "See, only guilty people would get this defensive. Then, let someone else wear it." She couldn't be bothered to expose the truth and simply said, "In any case, it won't be me." Harold frowned. "What are you trying to say?" "I've made myself clear." Charina lifted her head and repeated each word with certainty. "I don't want to marry you anymore. I won't be at the wedding tomorrow. You're playing hard to get." Harold started to scoff but stopped when he saw the icy look in her eyes. His gaze flickered to her bandaged thigh. Yesterday, she had stabbed herself, again and again, just to avoid being intimate with him. A strange frustration settled in his chest. "Charina, the wedding is tomorrow. Stop throwing a tantrum." That had to be it. Charina was just acting out because he'd been ignoring her lately. Once she calmed down, she'd be as eager as ever to marry him. As for the dress, Harold glanced at the wedding dress beside them. Charina thought he would do the same as last time, force her into the dress even at the cost of starving. But to her surprise, he simply said, "If you prefer the original wedding dress, then wear that one." Hazel looked at him. "Uncle Harry." Harold patted her head. "It's fine. You can design something else next time." Hazel's face paled slightly, but she nodded. After that, Harold left with her. But not long after, Hazel came back alone. She stood in front of Charina and asked coldly, "You saw everything in the car yesterday, didn't you?" The Hazel standing before her no longer had that usual timid look. Instead, her face was filled with open hostility. Charina didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked, "You drugged yourself?" Hazel didn't deny it. "That's right. Uncle Harry loves me. I just gave him an opportunity to act on it." Charina understood instantly. In her past life, she had never been sure whether Harold's obsession with Hazel was one-sided or mutual. Now, she knew. "Congratulations, then," she said. "I wish you both happiness." She meant it sincerely, but Hazel instantly lost her composure. "Don't give me that fake politeness, Charina. I'll admit that you're a lot craftier than before." She sneered. "You used to be a pathetic, lovesick fool. And now, you're playing the dignified act. You really think refusing to sleep with Uncle Harry last night is going to make him see you differently? Keep dreaming. Today, I'll show you exactly who Uncle Harry truly cares about." As soon as Hazel said that, She lunged at Charina and pressed a cloth over the latter's nose and mouth. A sharp, acrid scent filled her lungs. Charina's eyes widened in alarm, but when she tried to resist, her injured leg gave out beneath her. The household staff had already left, not wanting to linger on such a private conversation. Charina struggled, but her strength failed her. Darkness quickly swallowed her whole. Charina woke up to an unbearable heat. As she opened her eyes, all she saw were flames raging around her. Hazel lay beside her. Charina's mind snapped into focus. She turned to Hazel and shouted, "You set my house on fire. Are you out of your damn mind?" Hazel smirked. "You think Uncle Harry has feelings for you, don't you? I'll show you exactly how much he loves me." Before Charina could react, Harold's anxious voice rang out behind her, "Hazel. Where are you?" Hazel's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. Tears welled up in her eyes as she let out a pitiful cry, "Uncle Harry. I'm here. Please save me." Harold burst into the room at once. He froze when he saw Charina. But then, Hazel whimpered in pain, and his attention snapped back to her. "Hazel," he rushed forward, scooping her up in his arms. As he passed Charina, he threw a quick glance her way. "I'll take Hazel out first. I'll come back for you." Then, without another word, he carried Hazel out of the burning house. Chapter 9. Charina let out a mocking smirk. Ignoring the searing pain in her leg, she dragged herself forward with every ounce of strength she had. She had stopped believing Harold's promises a long time ago. She had to get out on her own. By the time she reached the first floor, the flames had nearly consumed everything. Harold was clearing a path to the exit. The moment he spotted her, his expression darkened. "I told you to wait for me." But this wasn't the time for an argument. He turned to help Hazel up when she suddenly shouted, "Watch out." A massive wooden beam, charred and weakened by the fire, cracked and came crashing down. The first beam fell toward Charina. "Charina." Harold's face paled as he instinctively stepped forward. But before he could take another step, a second beam snapped loose, plummeting straight toward Hazel. At the last moment, Harold turned back and shielded Hazel in his arms. The burning beam slammed into his back. He let out a muffled groan of pain. At the same time, the other beam struck Charina's back. Agonizing pain exploded through her body. Through the haze of fire and smoke, she barely registered the sight of firefighters finally breaking in. And there was Harold, still holding Hazel in his arms, protecting her with everything he had. Charina smiled weakly. Harold made the same choice even in this life. When Charina woke up, she was in a hospital bed. The first thing she saw was Harold, already bandaged and treated. The moment he noticed she was awake, his voice was stiff as he said, "I spoke to the doctor. Our injuries aren't serious. The wounds have been treated, so they won't affect the wedding today." Charina stared at him in disbelief. Even now, he still thought she wanted to marry him. She couldn't even be bothered to explain anymore. She got out of bed. "I want to be discharged." Today was the day she was leaving for Project H. She couldn't waste any more time. Harold, however, assumed she was just eager to get to the wedding venue. A sense of relief washed over him. As expected, Charina was still desperate to marry him. For some reason, that thought put him in a strangely good mood. Annoyed at himself for feeling that way, he quickly masked it with a stern expression. "I'm heading to the venue first. Come when you're done." The moment Harold left, Charina called for her driver. "Miss Moran, are we heading to the wedding?" he asked. Charina didn't hesitate. "Take me to the airport." As she grabbed her suitcase and headed straight to the terminal to meet Dylan, countless messages from Harold flooded her phone. "Where are you, Charina? Why aren't you here yet? If you don't start getting ready soon, there won't be enough time. Do you still want this wedding or not? I'm giving you 10 minutes. Now." Finally, his patience ran out. Charina's phone screen lit up with an incoming call. Without even glancing at it, she powered off her phone, pulled out the SIM card, and tossed it into the nearest trash can. Then, without looking back, she walked toward her gate and boarded the plane. Only one thought filled her mind. "Goodbye, Harold. From now on, I will live for myself." Chapter 10. Meanwhile, at the wedding venue, The guests had already taken their seats. A marriage between two of Dornwich's most powerful families was bound to be a grand spectacle. But behind the scenes, chaos reigned. Harold's father, Matthew Santiago's expression was dark as he snapped, "Harry, have you gotten in touch with Charina or not? The ceremony starts in 15 minutes. If there's no bride by then, we'll be the biggest joke in Dornwich." Harold's face was just as grim. He dialed Charina's number again, only to hear a cold, mechanical voice. "The number you've dialed is unavailable." With a sharp crack, Harold slammed his phone down on the table. What the hell was Charina doing? Wasn't this the wedding she had always dreamed of? Hadn't she schemed just to marry him? Hadn't her biggest wish been to be his bride? And now that the moment had finally arrived, where the hell had she gone? Meanwhile, Harold's mother, Ella Carter, had just finished a call with the hospital. "I checked. Charina was discharged, but she never showed up here. She wouldn't actually run away, would she?" The more Ella thought about it, the more convinced she became. She was nearly in tears. "She did say before that she wanted to call off the engagement, but I thought she was just being emotional. Now that I think about it, it must be because you've been too cold to her. That's why she's given up." How am I supposed to explain this to Livia? Ella and Livia had been best friends since childhood. When Livia passed away early, Ella had treated Charina as her own daughter, always hoping she'd marry Harold. "That's impossible," Harold snapped. "Charina wants to marry me." But the moment he said that, he remembered the moment Charina had been drugged the day before. That drug had been strong enough to break anyone's restraint. Any other woman in her state would have thrown herself at the nearest man. But Charina had endured it. She had refused to touch him. She had chosen to hurt herself rather than let things happen. It seemed like she really wanted to sever ties with him. At this thought, Harold felt as if a piece of his heart was missing. A sudden unease crept over. "I'm going to her house," he said, turning to leave. Matthew immediately shouted, "Moran Manor burned down. Where exactly are you planning to go?" Harold froze. Had almost forgotten. Moran Manor had mysteriously caught fire last night. By now, it was nothing but ruins. Was Charina angry because he had chosen to save Hazel first from the fire? That thought made his irritation spike even further. Just as he was about to leave in search of Charina elsewhere, a wedding staff member rushed in. "The bride has arrived." Chapter 11. Harrison exhaled in relief. As he said, Charina loved him to miss their wedding. She was just playing hard to get. At this thought, annoyance flared within him. Just as he was about to scold her for being childish, he looked up and froze. "Hazel, why are you?" He was even more stunned when he saw what she was wearing. "Why are you dressed like that?" The bride, standing before him wasn't Charina. It was Hazel. She was wearing the wedding dress she had designed. At his question, her cheeks flushed red. She lowered her head and spoke in a small, timid voice, "Uncle Harry, I heard that Charina never showed up. The wedding guests are all waiting. If there's no bride, the entire city will mock the Santiago family. So, I put on the dress. I thought if Charina isn't coming, then let me take her place. Let me marry you, Uncle Harry." Hazel lifted her gaze, her eyes shining with determination, as if she'd summoned all the courage in the world. Harold stood motionless. Ella, however, wasted no time. With a resounding slap, she struck Hazel across the face. "You little bitch. You think you can marry Harry? Dream on." Harold snapped out of his daze and immediately pulled Hazel behind him. He shot Ella a furious glare. "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" Ella scoffed coldly. "Oh, cut the act, Harold. You claim Hazel is just a young lady you adopted, but anyone with eyes can see there's something going on between you two. Tell me the truth. Is she the reason Charina wanted to break off the engagement?" Harold's eyes widened. Before he could respond, Hazel burst into tears. "Mrs. Santiago, blame me if you want. It's all my fault. I'm the one who fell in love with Uncle Harry. I couldn't control myself. I was the one who begged him to sleep with me. It's all on me. It has nothing to do with Uncle Harry." Ella staggered back, nearly fainting. "You slept with him. I swear, I'll beat the shit out of both of you." She lunged forward ready to strike Hazel and Harold, but Matthew suddenly growled, "Enough." Only then did Ella stop her in her tracks. Matthew looked at Hazel, silent for a long moment before saying, "At this point, there's no other choice. Hazel will marry Harry." Hazel's eyes lit up instantly. Meanwhile, Ella shrieked, "Honey, what are you talking about? Do you have a better idea?" Matthew's face darkened. "Every important family in Dornwich is here today. If there's no bride, we'll be the laughingstock of high society. If we replace the bride, people might gossip for a while. But if we have no bride at all, we'll never live this down. If you don't let Hazel marry Harry, where are you going to find another bride?" His gaze landed on Harold. "What do you think, Harry?" Hazel looked at Harold with anticipation, but to her surprise, he froze. "But," Harold hesitated, "I adopted Hazel." "That doesn't matter," Matthew said impatiently. "You two aren't related by blood. And there were no legal adoption papers. You just looked after her for a few years. People might talk, but that's still better than being humiliated in front of the entire city." Harold stood frozen. Outside, the wedding ceremony had already begun. The officiant's voice rang out, followed by a wave of applause from the guests. Hazel clutched Harold's arm anxiously. "Uncle Harry, what are you waiting for? Just say yes already." She could barely contain her excitement. Harold had taken her in when she was 10 years old. At first, she had admired him like a guardian. But once she hit her teenage years, she fell for him. Not just for his looks, but for the Santiago family's wealth. She could feel Harold's feelings for her, but his status and engagement to Charina had forced him to suppress them. Today, those shackles were finally gone. This was her best chance to marry him openly and rightfully. How could she let this chance slip away? With anticipation, she gazed at Harold, waiting for his answer. But to her shock, Harold suddenly lifted his head. "Dad, I can't marry Hazel." Chapter 12. Hazel's face went pale in an instant. Matthew was just as stunned. "Why, haven't you always liked Hazel?" Harold didn't even glance at Hazel. His voice remained calm as he said, "Dad, swapping out the bride might fix today's problem, but what about after that? Our family has countless deals with the Morans. Charina may have handed daily operations to her managers, but all the major decisions are still hers. You really think she'll be happy when she finds out I married Hazel? What if she was just throwing a tantrum today? What do you think she'll do when she realizes we replaced her? And what if she gets angry enough to pull all her business from us? On top of that, swapping brides at the last second makes us look bad. People will start questioning our integrity. Our reputation in business will take a hit." Harold laid out the risks one by one, and Matthew was convinced. "You've got a point. But today's wedding, it's not a big problem," Harold cut in. "Moran Manor just had a fire yesterday. Well, say Charina's injuries worsened unexpectedly, and she had no choice but to postpone the wedding. We'll reschedule for a month later." Ella's eyes lit up. "Yes, honey, trust me, Charina grew up under my watch. There's no way she'll ever let go of Harry." Matthew finally nodded. "Well, go with that plan." He and Ella headed outside to explain the situation to the guests. Only then did Harold turn to Hazel. Her eyes were red, filled with silent resentment. Seeing her red-rimmed eyes, he couldn't help but soften his tone. "Hazel." Hazel lifted her head abruptly. "Uncle Harry, are you really only marrying Charina because of the business?" Harold's eyelid twitched. "Of course. What else would it be?" Hazel's voice dropped to a whisper. "I thought you might actually love her." "That's impossible," Harold blurted out. Hazel forced a smile. "That's good to know." Harold clenched his fists. That was the truth. His marriage to Charina had always been about business. Nothing more. With the wedding called off, Harold immediately went to find Charina. He searched all the Moran properties but found no trace of her. Finally, he ended up at the college where she worked. Charina wasn't like other heiresses. She never studied business management or high fashion. Instead, she was obsessed with aerospace engineering. She'd gone straight to graduate school after earning her degree and then stayed on as a researcher. Harold had never understood her choices. The salary was pathetic, and it had zero benefit to the family business. He had already planned to make her quit after they got married. At the college, he found Charina's mentor, Dylan. He got straight to the point, asking if Dylan had seen Charina. Dylan was stunned. She already left. You don't know.